And this patient is 22-year-old seen for dependence to heroin and barbiturates. So what do you guys think we're going to look up? What is our main term there? It's going to be dependence, right? So we're going to look up dependence. And then once we get to dependence, we're going to look for heroin and barbiturates. So I'm on page 93 in the CM book, and if you guys see dependence, heroin is not a choice, right? Because we have to go, that's a specific kind of drug, so we have to go to the category. Does anyone know what category heroin fits into? What drug category? Nobody guess? Okay. It's actually an opioid. So once we get to dependence, we're going to go to drug and then down to opioid. And our default code right there is F11.20. Because if we look under, the subterms are with intoxication, with mood disorder, other specified disorder, psychosis, sexual dysfunction, sleep disorder, and specified disorder, withdrawal, or in remission. So none of those apply. So we're just going to do the main term default code, the F11.20. And usually we would flip to the tabular and verify, but while we're right here, because we have two substances to code, let's just also code the barbiturate. So again, we would go to dependence, and then if we go to barbiturate, it tells us C dependence, drug, sedative. So again, we have to go to the category of the drug. So we're going to go drug, and then dependence, and then sedative, which is in the third column. And again, there's lots of subterms if the condition was with, but our documentation doesn't say any of that, so we're just going to do the main term default code of the F13.20. So now go to the tabular, and we're going to look up both F11.20 and the F13.20 and see if we need to do anything, if there's includes or excludes notes that apply, additional characters that we need to add. So F11.20 is on page 535. And it doesn't tell us, there's nothing special that we need to do with that code. And then let's flip to our second one, F13.20. That's on page 537. And again, there's not any special notes that we need to apply. So our codes would be the F11.20 and F13.20. Let's move to the second case. So in this case, our patient is a 47-year-old male seen today with severe peripheral polyneuritis due to chronic alcoholism. Okay, so let's look up the polyneuritis. So once polyneuritis is on page 257, once we get there, what subterms do you guys think we're going to pick? If you guys want to type in the chat box, or I can unmute if people want to speak. Okay. So I don't know if you guys are on page 257, but what subterms do you think we're going to pick under the polyneuritis?
The alcoholic, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. The alcoholic. That's right. Because our case says due to chronic alcoholism. So we're going to pick the G62.1. So now let's go to that code and look at it. So let's flip to the tabular to G62.1. So page 569, there's not any excludes, includes, or special things with our code of G62.1 right there. So now that we're showing that our patient has that alcoholic polyneuritis or polyneuropathy, we want to show what kind of alcoholic the patient is, right? We want to tell the whole story. So just saying that our patient has polyneuropathy due to being an alcoholic doesn't tell the whole story, right? Because there's different kinds of alcoholism. So now let's code the chronic alcoholism by going to the main term, alcoholism, right? Chronic wouldn't be a main term, but alcoholism is. So on page 16, hopefully you guys are all there. And if we go down to alcoholism, we have our term chronic in parentheses, right? One of those modifying terms. And then it says without remission also in parentheses. So that's the default code, is that F10.20, which our patient was chronic, so that fits even better, but the patient wouldn't have to have chronic in the documentation to assign F10.20. It's just one of those modifying terms that's in the parentheses. So that the chronic alcoholism is coded with the F10.20. So now we verify that in the tabular. Remember, you always want to look it up in the alphabetical index and then verify in the tabular. So 534 is where F10.20 is, and there's not an additional character or includes, excludes notes there, so we'll just move on. So the two codes for that case are the G62.1 and then the F10.20. And then we have this practice case, and then I'm going to pull up one of the Coding Roundtable small group collaboration cases next. So in this patient, we have a 44-year-old male seen today with perforation of the right tympanic membrane due to chronic suppurative otitis media of the right ear. So what do you think we're going to look up first?
Otitis media, maybe?
Yeah, we can look up otitis media.
Or tympanic membrane, one or the other, I think.
Yeah, so with the site, we never want to go to the anatomical site. Those are typically the subterms. We would go to what the condition is and then where. So for the tympanic membrane, it's a perforation. So the main term there would be the perforation. And then we would go, yeah, to tympanic membrane, yeah. And then otitis media is the condition, right? So we go to otitis. So page 243 is where otitis is, and then if we go down to media, which is the type of otitis right in the middle, then we can go down to chronic. And if we did otitis media chronic and then suppurative, it tells us see otitis media suppurative chronic. So same column, otitis media, but we're going to just go down to S to suppurative, so it's almost the very end of otitis on page 243. The third column is where I am. So otitis media, and then suppurative, and then we want to make sure we go down to chronic, and it gives us the code H66.3, and then there's the check mark. Do you guys see that in your alphabetical index? How it has the black check mark, well, the black box, I guess, with the white check mark in it. That means we need an additional character. So definitely verify in the tabular. So if we flip to H66.3 in the tabular, so I'm on page 619. What code do you guys think we would select? So we're going to pick, it was at the right ear, right? Chronic suppurative otitis media of the right ear. So once we get to our H66.3, we're going to pick the X1 for other chronic suppurative otitis media right ear. You guys see that code okay on page 619?
Yep.
So, okay, H66.3X1, so that's our first code. And then we also want to code the perforation of the right tympanic membrane. So now in your index, we're going to go to P, to perforation. And then what was perforated? Well, it was the tympanic membrane. So once we get to perforation, we're going to go to T, tympanic. So page 250, it's in the middle column, and H72.9. Yeah, perfect, good. And then this also has our checkbox, so we need to make sure that we add an additional character, right? And many times when we're coding conditions of the eyes and the ears, the additional character is the laterality, right? Was it the right ear, the left ear, bilateral? Same with the eyes. So it's important to make sure that you go that extra step because that's telling the story of the code. So in our tabular, we're going to go to H72.9. And again, it was the right ear. So what is our code going to be?
H72.91.
Perfect, that's right. Yep. H72.91. So for this case, we have just the two codes again, the H66.3X1 and then H72.91.